Thanks for coming to the last session of the day. I realize I'm the last person standing between you guys and happy hour, which is always a challenging position. But I think we're going to have a really exciting cap off of the program today. We're going to talk a little bit about this concept we're calling open policing, which is a concept built around this new movement for law enforcement and public safety to release more data to help build trust with communities, to help engage and have conversations about what's happening in public safety and law enforcement, and ultimately lead to positive outcomes. And I'm joined by a star-studded cast of folks from the public sector. Justin Ehrlich from state of California, special assistant to at DOJ. Lamar Gardier from New Orleans, and Bill Schreier, newly appointed CIO for Seattle Police Department. So welcome to you guys. Thanks for coming this session. So, and I'm Cam Caldwell. I'm a director at Socrata, and we'll do a little bit of an overview of kind of what's happening, and then I'll turn the mic over to these gentlemen to give a few stories and vignettes about what's happening in this space, kind of some stories from the field. So kind of mandatory plug about Socrata for folks that don't know us. We're a Seattle-based company. We're focused solely in the public sector. We work with about 300 different organizations around the world. The majority of those are right here in the US. We work with just about every major city, many major counties, about 70% of the states, and a lot of federal agencies. Very proud to have City of New Orleans and Seattle as customers, along with Seattle and Baltimore, San Francisco, LA, a bunch of other ones. So from Socrata's point of view, there's three primary goals of government, and we picked this up by working with our customers, which is kind of how we are constantly educated about what's happening in the space, and through events like the Code for America Summit we learn more. But how we structure things is that the purpose of government is to improve quality of life, provide a foundation for economic development, and to serve with operational excellence. And I think nowhere is that more evident in the work that's happening right now in public safety. Of course, quality of life is important. Public safety is always the top priority of any executive at a city or county or state government. Economic impact, of course, is impacted by public safety. A safe city is a great place to live and a great place to start a business. And then every government wants to be efficient in the way that they run their operations. And we at Socrata, we're a data company, so we believe that data really fuels the 21st century government. It allows you to show transparency, to promote trust, to engage with citizens, to support fact-based decision making. All of these things are tied into what we're seeing in the police movement that we're going to talk about in more depth today. So there's been a challenge lately in law enforcement. For roughly the last 18 months, there's been some turmoil in this space. We all know the story about Ferguson, Missouri, and when the civil unrest, started happening across the country, there was a number of conversations started among executives across the country, including the White House, about what's happening, why is this happening, and what can we do about it? What's the sort of overarching points here? And one of the things that's happened lately in the push for transparency in the public sector, of course, is that transparency is happening in the public safety, whether it happens from the public safety officials or not. For instance, a lot of us are walking around with these handheld devices in our pockets, these video cameras, and are capturing information about what's happening from law enforcement. So that kind of adds to the equation and the idea that transparency is over and is happening. But obviously there's a problem. There's a problem and manifests in some civil unrest that happened in places like Ferguson, in Baltimore, and Cleveland. And I don't want to steal too much thunder from my friend Clarence, who's going to go into a greater discussion about the background here in the Police State Initiative, but I'm going to talk a little bit about it. And you guys should all come to Clarence's session tomorrow, right? Tomorrow at 2:30 to hear more about what's happening from the White House's point of view. But we've seen in the past couple years a lot of attention from the press. So U.S. senators calling for more rules about data release. There was a really powerful story that The Guardian produced, of course, a UK-based newspaper, about police killings. The Washington Post has done reports. I've been kind of talking through this for the past 6 months or so, and I have these slides here, and these are kind of old. That number is actually close to double what it is on the slide in terms of fatal shootings by police in 2015. So there's been a lot of media attention. And so there's been a movement to do something about this, to do something about both the realities on the ground and the perception. So in December of 2014, President Obama started a task force on 21st century policing. And out of that the task force was built to try and figure out what's going on, what's happening, why is this all the civil unrest? Why are these riots happening? What's going on with reaction, and what can we do about it? One of the task force released a report that came out of their findings, and it's actually a really interesting report. You can sit down in a couple hours and read it. And one of the biggest the take-home messages that I got from it when I read it is there's a general need in the country to move from a warrior mentality in law enforcement, where it's kind of the police force working against fighting crime, fighting neighborhoods, in some cases working with military surplus gear that's been provided from the federal government, to more of a guardian mentality, more of a protect and serve mentality, that the police force is there working for citizens, not against neighborhoods, and is working in the best interest of citizens to promote safe neighborhoods, safe cities, safe places to live and work. And one of the results of the report was the creation of the Police State Initiative. How many people in here have heard of the Police State Initiative? I'm just curious. So actually, probably most of the people in this room. So you guys know a lot about it. It's, for those that haven't heard of it, it's an initiative that's built on the concept that data and the release of data and being transparent in the way that law enforcement works can help build trust and build communities and start a dialogue, start a way to have a conversation with neighborhoods, with citizens, and with communities. And the concept here is that, if I can succinctly phrase it, it's that you have to start with transparency. People want to know that a police department doesn't have anything to hide, for instance. So being transparent, putting all your data out there, not only the crimes that are happening, but things that the police department is doing in terms of normal operations. If you release that data, that helps build trust. When you rebuild trust in a community, you can start to engage and have a dialogue. You can have conversations with leaders in the community, and you can move things from a us versus them to a let's work together and get some positive results. And these are all sort of built on the concepts of community policing, which means it's everybody's responsibility to have a safe place to live, not just the police departments. A number of data sets are recommended by the White House as part of the Police State Initiative. These are 8 of them. And you'll notice none of these are really about crime incidents. So that's a result of things that happen within a city, and the police do have to react to those, of course. But these are things that happen within a police department themselves. How fast do they respond to 911 calls? What complaints are there about the force? When do they use force? When do they use their weapons? So on and so forth. And so this is a real move to be transparent. The White House announced this, and they immediately got 15 cities to sign up, and then I think they got 6 more. And so when they went live with the Police State Initiative, there were 21 cities that were participating. Is that right? Including New Orleans and Seattle. Code for America has been a great partner for the Police State Initiative. There's a great site online that describes the 8 data sets and the cities that are releasing those data sets and scores them based on if the data is online, is it machine readable, is context provided, is it transactional? So you get these kind of scorecards, and it's a great place to go. You can Google Police Open Data Census to see this in detail, and you can see all the cities that have released at least one data set of one of these categories. So what I wanted to do today is talk about, give you some stories, some vignettes about what's happening out there in the field where public sector organizations are using data to take a step forward in really quite a brave and unique way in these cases to build trust within communities and to start a conversation. And to start things off, I'm going to invite Lamar up to the podium to talk a little bit about New Orleans and Operation Spark.
Thanks, Cam. So this is a really interesting development. I think that New Orleans is even in the conversation about open police data. When Clarence and Denise Ross called and asked us to be involved in this, I wanted to say no, but I couldn't. I knew I couldn't, but I really wanted to. Because it's a scary topic, right? We knew how to do open data already. We started to do it in 2011, 2012, and Denise Ross actually really helped us to get that going. So I knew we knew how to do that part, but how do you convince a police department to start just giving up more information about itself when it's already under siege? How do you convince an administration to put more information out there about itself that folks can use to essentially beat up on them, right? So, how am I going to make this happen? But I got to figure it out, right? So, fortunately, we had a new police chief, and we brought it to him and talked about its power for increasing accountability and trust and things like that. And he was immediately on board. So that was already kind of one hurdle passed, and I immediately started to relax because the police chief was on board and he was supportive of it. We also happen to have a consent decree in New Orleans right now, which essentially means that we have to create a lot of data about our police department and report on it regularly, right? Which also means that we have the data available too. So already there are 2 kind of positive things happening for us. The third, though, is going to be a little bit more difficult. How do we create the climate politically where the administration was okay with doing it, but when we did it, the community understood that it was a tool for exploring policing, the act of policing, and not necessarily just more crime stats, more crime statistics. We already have those. You understand that. This is a conversation about the act of policing. So this is kind of where we ended up. New Orleans is also a tech hire city with the White House. This is another White House program around tech hiring. As part of that, we invited Operation Spark up to the White House to have some conversations. While they were there, they started talking to some folks about having a hackathon in the summer that maybe we use public safety data around, which was a great idea. And suddenly the idea came up that maybe this is a way to really make this real for folks in a safe space. So Operation Spark is a coding boot camp in New Orleans whose mission is to make sure that those kids who are underrepresented in technology have an opportunity to learn, to learn how to be coders and have access to the jobs that are coming online in New Orleans that they otherwise might not have access to. We have higher education that teaches computer science, of course, but we aren't graduating a ton of people. We have more jobs available right now than we have workforce to fill them. So these coding boot camps are stepping up to help fill some of that gap. So they're specifically working with kids around coding. Well, this hackathon was an opportunity for us to test releasing this police data to a group of folks who could do something with it in the hackathon, but didn't have the same political agenda that some folks in the city might have. So we had the idea to pre-release police data to this group. We took some data sets, use of force, stops, so all the stops from pedestrian stops and traffic stops and things like that. We already had 911 calls for service up there, but we decided to add response time to it as well. Just for good measure, we threw in our 311 data as well, because there's some opportunities for correlations between 311 and 911 data sometimes. So we provided that information to, and I didn't really know at first that I was going to be in this picture, but we had this opportunity when we got the data set to a point where it's as good as we can get it just by looking at it, but without someone kind of stepping through all of it, we're not sure that we can find all the errors. So we pre-released these data sets to these kids at Operation Spark, and we went in to spend some time with them so that everyone understood that this is pre-release data, which means please don't release it to the public right now. It's pre-released. We know it's not perfect. We know it's not clean. Spend some time with it. Help us figure out how it can be better. Does it have enough information for you to draw conclusions about it if you wanted to, if you were a part of the public? So we went through this process of really working with them on creating applications and ideas and design challenges around using this data to make clear the act of policing. And there were just some great outcomes from it. An unexpected outcome was that the city employees that we brought in to spend with these kids left energized about the job that they did, because they realized at that moment that what I do on a daily basis matters, and people care to see this data and the outcome of some of the things that we do. That was an immediately good outcome to me, that our employees were energized. At the same time, this young man here, you see, he has his hand on the computer there. His name is Damon. Damon was an interesting story because, like many young folks or people out in your cities, there's sometimes a lack of trust with city government and your police department. You might, maybe sometimes at the same time, you think they have data about me and what I'm doing, but at the same time, you think that there's too much ineptitude for them to do anything useful with that data, right? So there's this weird big brother / they don't know what they're doing kind of feeling about cities sometimes. When Damon started to look at that data, he immediately found himself in the data. Now, what I mean there is that his grandmother had made a request for 311 to bring a recycling bin out to him. He was able to find that request when it was filled and then verified his memory. Yes, it was filled a couple of weeks ago, just like this thing says here, which immediately caused this level of trust in him that the city knew what it was doing. And it actually had records of when he called. His call was actually there, and when it was resolved, that information was there as well. Seeing that, working with that data, immediately made him feel like he could trust the city more, which was another great outcome. We went from there into the conversation about doing some research with this data and creating applications around police data. We actually had our police chief come as well, which was another major component. We had buy-in from city leaders. I came, so the CIO was there. The police chief was there, and other members of NOPD came, so that if there were questions about the data, if there were questions about how this is used or what this field means, or in this field there's a value that doesn't seem to make sense to me, can the police department help you work through it? They were able to do that. Having the police chief there let these folks know that this mattered. This was important. He showed up, he talked to the kids, he spent some time with them, and he wrote his first line of code. As far as we can tell, he's the first police chief to write a line of code. I think that line was like NOPD. It was a function call. It was like NOPD.show progress or something like that. So it was great. He was excited about it. So it energized him to see that folks are actually doing something useful with this. Our communications group was excited about it because the resulting stories were all positive stories about kids in NOPD in the city working together to look at the act of policing, right? And how that could affect our actual residents and such. So it was a great outcome for us. Absolutely something that was a win on all sides. The kids absolutely enjoyed it, learned something about coding, learned how to work with big data, learned how to work with open data. We were able to get a set of folks concentrated on the data to test its quality and to tell us what was wrong with that data so that we could correct it before we release it. We learned what some of the stories were that people imagined as they saw this data, which gives us some insight into how we put a police site together that's around open data so that we can address the concerns that people would, for the concerns and baggage that folks might bring to the conversation when they first encounter a website on open police data. So all around, it was a good opportunity for us to engage with the community and really kick off our open police data efforts. So that was our experience. It was a good one. So Denise Ross, again, I mentioned her early. She was the one who really kind of kickstarted open data in New Orleans. And what she says here was she was always a believer in data's ability to build trust. But until you see it, it's just one of those things that you believe is true, that you believe and hope is true, right? And you say it to leadership, and you just hope and pray that one day it just kind of sinks in. Well, seeing these kids work with it was the moment she was able to see trust be born, right? Witnessed its birth, which was a powerful thing, not only for her, but for all of us that had an opportunity to work with this group. It was a powerful moment for the press as well. They were able to see how this kind of event can move the needle, and that was a really great outcome as it relates to releasing data sets that could be potentially problematic. So thanks, y'all. It looks like we have the California Department of Justice next.
Hi, I'm Justin Ehrlich. I'm a Special Assistant Attorney General, and I advise the Attorney General on technology and data. As I stand here slightly blinded by the lights, but seeing a fair amount of people in the room, I'm sort of struck by what a remarkable time this is for all of us in this community. A few years ago, maybe 2 years ago, I started doing work not at the Department of Justice, but I was supporting a foundation doing open data work, trying to build a benchmark system to help cities make more data-driven decisions and really incorporate evidence. And we spoke to like 100 people from across the country asking what it would take to incorporate data into your decision making. And one of the lessons we learned 2 years ago was whatever you do, don't start with criminal justice. That's going to be a waste of time. People will be feet dragging. So put that tier 7 on a tier 5 ranking. If I sit here now, we've got Cam's panel, we've got Clarence's panel tomorrow. There's going to be a whole section of, I think, a talk on Code for America on safety and justice. Just the level of activity right now is pretty remarkable. So that's both exciting and probably also a function of some of the tragic events that have happened over the last couple of years that just demand reform. I think that lens has then been really interesting to me as we've embarked on our own journey at the Department of Justice, which on some level started when the Attorney General first arrived, and we sit on a treasure trove of data at the state of California because we get a lot of data from all the local enforcement agencies, and they have to report to us. And then we collect it, and I think for years have probably not done that much with it. So when she first got elected, she wanted to figure out how we can make more use of that data. Then more recently, after all the horrific events, we started looking a little bit closer at the data because as more and more YouTube videos were posted and more stories were written about, we all started to have to ask ourselves these really tough questions about, well, how big is this problem, and like, what is really going on? We should really look at the data. Let's figure out this use of force thing. Let's go look at the metrics around use. Oh, there's no use of force. Oh, that's awkward. And that, I think, is like, unfortunately, a finding that many cities and states found across the country, and obviously the FBI found as well. And so we sort of were all scratching our heads, thinking we should really address this. And as we started going down that path of trying to figure out what data we were missing, we realized that there was a real role that data is going to play in criminal justice reform. And so a very targeted ask of, let's start to explore whether we should collect use of force data from the state, from the local enforcement agencies, really led us down a whole new path of open data to drive transparency and accountability. So I think probably everyone in this room has heard some journey of sort of what started, and that was ours. So what we started doing was, as a part of our general reform efforts, we had a standing call, a 21st century policing group of a lot of local enforcement agencies, and we started just trying to understand what it would take to collect the data, and understood just how nuanced and tricky it was, because people were using different standards, and so that was going to be an issue. And then there was going to be an issue of how you were going to portray the data, and is it going to be a gotcha moment, or are you going to provide context? And you can imagine many other hosts of questions came out. And this was all a great reminder on why it's so hard to be transparent in this space, because there's a lack of trust on all sides. And there's probably multiple sides, but obviously one is the law enforcement is skeptical that people are going to try and be using this as shame and blame and gotcha moments, and then the other side, people are skeptical about it's all being hidden behind a data Fort Knox. And so the one thing that was clear to us was we needed to be an impartial broker to show that we were going to show the truth, whatever that may be, but also provide the relevant context so everyone felt that it was fair. And so much of our work over the starting since January was really just having calls with a lot of stakeholders to figure out what is the type of data we would want to be showing, how would we show it, what would be fair. So that was actually a lot of the work that we embarked upon, just to start collecting data. And then at some point we realized in conversations with people that one of our biggest value adds was not just collecting and posting data, but also really making sense of it. Telling data stories, making it clear and digestible and understandable to the public at large, to journalists, create a place where people could really understand what was going on. And so that was when the concept of open justice was conceived in our office, which was going to then be a set of a justice dashboard, which would try and provide data visualization around the data we have, as well as an open data portal where people can download the data sets themselves. So we have many data sets in our office, but we wanted to start with the ones that we felt were most relevant to the calls from the public. So we decided we would release our data sets on death in custody, arrest rates, and law enforcement officers killed or assaulted. And we embarked on our minimum viable product, which we launched on September 2nd. I think there might be a picture. Let's see. There we go. It launched. And it is a treasure. Oh, let's see. So we sit on a treasure trove of data. It's a treasure trove. She really wanted to emphasize the treasure part of it. And we wanted to share it. And why do we want to do it? There's two purposes, and Cam alluded to both of them in his process chain for engagement. One is we wanted to be transparent and show that we weren't looking to hide anything. We want to create a dialogue or a conversation. The other secondary one is we also want to inform better public policy. And to that end, as a part of our work, we brought on some academics from UC Berkeley to help us really clean up and make sense of the data and analyze it. We're bringing on a data scientist to help with some of our more robust analytics coming forward. But so the idea was twofold, basically, which is we've got nothing to hide and we should all hold ourselves accountable and shine a light. I think Louis Brandeis once said sunlight is the best disinfectant, or there's probably lots of great quotes about the importance of transparency. So that was what we were solving for there. And then also really wanted this to be an analytical effort to help inform public policy. With those high ambitions, we then started with a team of roughly 4 to try and make that happen. And so we started with our academic analyzing the data and then trying to figure out how to visualize it. And we were lucky to have on staff 2 website developers who pulled in on this initiative, and we created version 1 of Open Justice. And I think very consciously we made this decision of just like a startup or any initial version, we just wanted to get something up to start the dialogue and not wait for all the data sets that we have. And in part, that was because we're still trying to figure out if we're solving on the problems of trust and making better public policy, we still are trying to figure out exactly what that theory of change is going to look like. So we wanted to launch with something and start getting some feedback. And so as we speak, we are starting to have focus groups and user persona interviews. We actually had the benefit of working with the Code for America team on a workshop, some of whom are here, and so thank you very much. One of their pieces of advice was make sure to get a lot of feedback from your users, so that is the phase in which we are now. So we're doing a lot of user feedback and trying to understand exactly what are the sorts of things that will help build on the trust? What are the types of data sets that people would want to see next? And if this were not a PowerPoint, I guess anyways, if you were to scroll down the website, there will be a place that would say, what data sets do you want to see next? Which is all part of a broader sort of conversational goal of this is really a dialogue about all of us coming together to solve these criminal justice problems. So version 2 will be coming in the coming months, and we're probably looking to do rollouts every few months to just continue to push out what we have. And what we're, as I said, this is all built in-house, and we're now looking to figure out ways to scale, whether it's through hackathons or through data visualization challenges or through finding other excited folks who want to participate in the effort. So if anyone's interested, let me know afterwards. But this is the start, and as soon as this finished, we got this up. The Attorney General said, "Great, what's next?" So we're building, working and developing that product roadmap now. So thanks.
So, I want to know a little bit about you for my files. Oh, that's a really old movie. How many folks in this room work for government, state, local, federal? And how many are civic technologists, hackers, that sort of thing? All right. Has anyone in the room been a police officer, FBI agent, anything like that? Couple? Okay. Has anyone in the room been a customer of the criminal justice system? And we actually have some customers of the criminal justice system. And I'm not talking about speeding tickets here, parking tickets. Okay. For those of you who are technologists or hackers, I want to introduce Brandon Boyer from the Seattle Police Department. And he is our go-to guy for a lot of the open data stuff that we do in Seattle Police, real-time crime center, and that sort of thing. So be sure and seek him out afterwards if you're interested in the hacking and the technology. So my name is Bill Schreier. I'm the 5-day-old, I know I don't look 5 days old, the 5-day-old CIO for the Seattle Police Department, but my history in public safety goes back many years. Starting about when I was a police officer on the street for 4 years in a city in the Midwest. So that was my first real encounter with the criminal justice system, and I've worked in and out of it since then. So the first thing, we've got a series of topics to talk about today. The first thing is the Performance Seattle. Now, I am not a salesperson for Socrata. However, Socrata has really partnered with the City of Seattle and a number of other cities to help open up our data. This is Socrata's performance management tool. Is that right? Yeah, open performance tool. And essentially what it is, this builds on, many of you heard about CityStat in the Baltimore, Maryland, CompStat in New York City. So these statistical tools that collected stats on the performance of how the city government is doing. And this is really kind of the latest iteration in that. This is the statistics that City of Seattle tracks, including those on public safety. The one public safety thing you see highlighted here is arrive quickly to fire scenes. 78% of calls within 4 minutes to fire scenes. But there's more than that. Here's a few other public safety performance measures. The difficulty with performance measures is it's easy to measure outputs. We got 1 million 911 calls to the Seattle Police, approximately 1 million, Seattle Police 911 Center last year. That's an output. That's not a performance measure. How fast did we get to the scene of something? Like getting to the scene of a fire or getting to the scene of a medical emergency. I think we see here 84%, center bottom there, arrive to emergency medical calls quickly, 84% within 4 minutes. That's kind of a phenomenal statistic. It's harder in the criminal justice side to actually measure performance. What is the reduced motor vehicle theft? Big issue in Seattle. 452 monthly motor vehicle thefts. So what's the performance statistic there? Is 300 motor vehicle thefts good? Well, if you're the victim of that, and I've been a victim of motor vehicle theft in Seattle, 300 isn't very good. 0 is a great goal, but it's obviously unattainable. So there's some difficulties here, but at least we're tracking it. This is a slightly different topic. This is an article that I wrote before I was CIO in Seattle PD on the future of police video. We had a hackathon. We called it a hackathon, but it really was a workshop on wearable cameras. And you'll see Jen Pelkia there, who actually showed up for this. This is a couple of months ago. So body-worn video is a huge initiative nationwide. And we have a relatively new police chief in Seattle, Kathy O'Toole. She's actually been around for more than a year. Wants to put a body cam on every police officer in Seattle. And that's, of course, an initiative of many police chiefs across the country. But it creates huge data issues, as we all know. Policy issues and the data issues are much larger than the technology issues. Seattle, with Florida, has one of the best or worst, depending on your viewpoint, sunshine laws, a FOIA, a Public Disclosure Act. Essentially, in Washington State, any video has to be open to the public unless it's an active criminal investigation. So that means if you've got 200 police officers on the street and all the dash cam that are involved, and you're taking, say, 1,000 or 2,000 video pieces in a day, every one of those has to be made public upon request unless there's an active video investigation. Now, if you're a victim and you're caught on body cam video, or you call a police officer to come investigate a burglary in your house and he or she walks through the house with the body cam video on, do you want to be a victim twice when that video shows up? The only thing that has to be kept away from the public is the identity of juveniles in Washington State. Victims, complainants, and others don't have any protection from the FOIA or Public Disclosure Act unless it's policy of the department. So I only mention that in terms of body cams is a great potential tool, but the policy issues, especially in an open state like Washington, are huge. So this is the story of the guy on the left, Tim Clemens. So speaking of public disclosure, Mr. Tim Clemens asked that the Seattle Police Department publicly disclose every one of its videos. Now, of course, we don't have many body cams deployed, so this is mostly dash cam video. And I don't know, Brandon, how many years of dash cam video do we have stored? I know it's like 300 terabytes or something like that.
I think it's about 4 or 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, but it was over 300. It's over 320 terabytes.
Exactly. Terabytes, pretty soon it'll be petabytes, which I always thought was something animal control should handle, petabytes. But it's a huge amount of data. So think of the number of people you got to employ to look at 300 terabytes of data and redact it.
It's over 60 people for 60 years.
60 people for 60 years. It's a large number. Well, the guy on the right here, Mike Wagers, is the Chief Operating Officer at Seattle Police Department. His solution was, hey, rather than disclose all this video, we're going to hire Tim. And actually, we hired Tim as kind of a civic hacker to start doing some of the work we need in terms of helping to redact the video. And Tim actually came up with a couple of innovative ways to redact video, but nothing's perfect. And if you think about it for a moment, when is video taken? It's not taken on bright, sunshiny days. Oakland always is full of sunshine, right? It's taken at night. It's taken with the sides of faces. It's taken in the rain, and redaction is a huge issue. Not solved. Like New Orleans, as Lamar mentioned, City of Seattle, incidentally, is under a consent decree with the Department of Justice. So there's a lot of data that we collect on use of force. I'm going to get on the open data pulpit for just a moment here. So how many of you have in your neighborhood a blog that you regularly look at for news of the neighborhood? Okay, so the traditional media has gone the way of the dodo bird, the daily newspapers. They still exist, but in many cases, many neighborhoods now have a neighborhood blog, like this one is the Capitol Hill Seattle blog. Some of these blogs can be our best allies for the criminal justice system, because they will take this data and they will display it, and they will help interpret it for the people who read the blogs and the people in the neighborhood. Public safety is not about putting more cops on the street, or more prosecutors, or more judges, or more people in prisons. It's about people helping themselves. The more data that we can expose so that block watch captains and citizens can actually see what's going on in their neighborhood in a real-time basis, literally as it's happening, because these bloggers will take photographs that are crowdsourced and actually put them up on their blog. Then they'll come to us, the Seattle Police Department, and ask for information. The more data that we can give the bloggers and the media that's accurate, the more we can enlist the citizen to support the police department and support public safety. The last thing that I'll talk about, and that's my timer telling me I'm done, is a really nifty tool that Socrata just within the last couple of months has put out. It's called Decision Lens. And I'm going to show two maps here. If you go to the data.seattle.gov and look at 911 calls, Seattle was one of the very first cities to put 911 calls up on the website. If you look at 911 calls, you can actually use the Decision Lens Socrata tool to really cut the data in many different ways without necessarily downloading it. So this is bike thefts. Now I want you to look at that map carefully about where in Seattle the bike thefts are occurring. And Seattle is roughly here, 145th Street down to here. This is Puget Sound, Pacific Ocean's out here, and this is Lake Washington. This is the rich suburbs. And here's the next map, which is robbery. Now I'm going to go back and forth. So this is robbery. This is bike theft. This is robbery. This is bike theft. So is there anything that stands out between robbery and bike theft in those two maps? What? First is a subset of the second. That's partially true, but I also want you to look at this neighborhood right here as we go back and forth. Robbery, bike theft. robbery. So what happens is the robbery is more concentrated here, bike thefts more up here. This tends to be a less diverse part of the city, very much white. Much of our diversity, Hispanic, Asian American, African American, occurs in this area. This zip code right here and this one down here are two of the most diverse zip codes in the United States in terms of the mix of people. So you can see that the robbery, the violent crime from this tends to be more concentrated in those diverse neighborhoods for various reasons. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for the chance to talk, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay. So I was just going to go through a couple other quick examples and just more stories from the field. Is there anybody here from Chattanooga, by chance? Oh, good. Nice. Well, I just wanted to tell just a quick highlight about Chattanooga and their work around public safety. So Chattanooga has a dashboard for performance management. They call it Chattadata. Fantastic name. But you can see they've got 6 high-level goals that they're measuring as a city that are kind of specific and built around the things that are most important to the administration of Chattanooga and the citizens. One of those, or 2 of those, are safer streets and growing economy. You can see under safer streets, which of course is a public safety concept, reduction of violent crime, family violence, and fire incidents are 3 specific goals they've called out here. The one thing I wanted to say about this story is Chattanooga has decided that reducing domestic violence is a priority for the city, and they're going to make it a focus area in the way they build their performance management programs. And what's important here, I think, is the specificity in setting goals around public safety. So you've got specificity. You're dealing with a focused type of issue. You're going to put attention of it, and you're going to share not only the goal that you're moving towards, but also the raw data with folks, and you're going to do that publicly, and that's what Chattanooga is doing. I wanted to tell a story about Rutland, Vermont, who is, I believe, the smallest city participating in the Police State Initiative, city of about 16,000 people, kind of in rural Vermont. It's actually the 3rd biggest city in Vermont, but it's still pretty small. Did anybody read this story in Rolling Stone last year? Yeah, Candace, you read it? If you haven't read the story, I really recommend you take 30 minutes and read it. It's a fascinating story about what's happening in rural New England with an outbreak of heroin use and kind of the roots of the problem, and then kind of how it's affecting these communities. And it talks about how it's based in the use of prescription pain meds, and then kind of moves into heroin. A lot of it moves up from New York City. And in a town like Rutland, it's really devastated the town. In fact, in 2012, they had a real crisis on their hands, and the crisis went across a number of different parts of the city and parts of the city government. Because what you have is an outbreak in heroin use. So you've got people doing illegal things. They're using illegal drugs. They're selling them and possessing them. That's a problem for the police department. You've got people stealing things to pay for drugs. That's a problem for the police department and the community, of course. And then in some cases, you've even got folks doing things like turning to prostitution to pay for the drug habit. So we've got problems with the police department. You've got problems with the health department, and the Rutland Police Department started just arresting people and trying to get people in jail and deal with it. And they realized that was simply addressing the symptom of the problem and not the root of it. The root of it was they had it wasn't really a criminal problem, it was a health problem. And people needed help, and they really wanted to kind of get out of the cycle of using heroin. And so and by the way, this cross-cut across a bunch of different agencies within the city of Vermont. It affected, of course, the police. It affected the health department that was dealing with the drug use and getting overcrowded in their clinics and their treatment centers. It even affected housing because a lot of the old housing stock was kind of being turned into heroin dens and people were using it to use moving into vacant buildings, so you have a problem with blight. So to address this, Rutland started this really groundbreaking program called Project Vision. And the reason why I bring this up is because it really speaks to flipping the script on the way that police departments engage with communities and citizens. What they did is they realized they needed to treat the root of the problem, and that it's a healthcare problem. And so they actually created space at the Rutland Police Department for faith-based groups, for healthcare providers, for drug substance abuse treatment groups to come in and actually work at the police department, create a dialogue with the police department of what was happening so they could holistically address the problem in Vermont. And they've had great results. First of all, they get buy-in from the community in which they serve. They come up with collaborative responses, and they've really dramatically affected the problem both in the crime and in the health outbreak or the health epidemic. And there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think the notion here is that the police couldn't attack it with force. They couldn't arrest the way another problem, is the way that they describe it. And so now good things are growing in Rutland. And kind of as a result of this newfound thinking, Rutland volunteered to be part of the Police Data Initiative. And they just this week released a site where they're just putting 2 data sets out there to begin with. They're putting out use of force, which is a key data set in the Police Data Initiative that talks about when officers use force when they're dealing with, when they're arresting folks. And community engagement, and that's an important data set too because it talks about the positive things that the police is doing out in the community. And so you've got this balance, sort of accounting and transparency with the use of force. And you've got this community engagement data that talks about the 85% of the work that that police do across the nation that has nothing to do with fighting crime. It's about education. It's about reaching out and building bridges with the community. So we're about out of time. I could go through examples all day of things that are 2 minutes. Is that what that is? Or is that a question?
Just going to ask a question.
Oh yeah. Oh, sorry.
If you were opening up for questions, I don't need too many questions.
Yeah. You know what? I can send you guys this deck. The point of the rest of these visualizations is there's a lot of great stuff happening. There's a lot of data being released. This is Dallas officer-involved shootings. This is Safe City Dashboard from City of Los Angeles. You can see it's not just about, public safety is not just about crime. It's about things like tsunami evacuation routes. It's about building inspections. You want to have safe buildings. This is citizen complaints from the City of Cincinnati. This is a goal within the City of Baltimore for reducing heroin intoxication deaths. This is City of Plano, Texas, Public Safety Dashboard. Here they've got, I think what's cool here is they do a survey about how people feel about the police force. This is a project called $1 Million Blocks that Derek Eder of DataMade started in the city of Chicago, and it's a really interesting data set. It gathers public information about incarceration rates by block where people live in Chicago, and it shows the actual money that's being spent keeping people in jail, many of them nonviolent, in the city of Chicago that's going through a really severe fiscal crisis. So the question is, why are we spending all this money keeping folks in jail? I think Derek's going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow. So, what's next? I think the overall point I want to bring home here is that transparency in the public sector, I don't think it's going away. It's going to happen whether police departments do it or whether the Guardian does it. This is the latest. Is anybody who's seen this website? This is a really just kind of like emotionally stirring website that shows the number of people killed by police in the U.S., and they crowdsource it through news sources, and they cite those news sources, and it's considered fairly legitimate data. And so this is basically this is the story being controlled by the Guardian and the media, because there's a lack of data being published directly from police departments. And so it's a decision of whether police departments are proactive or reactive. And of course, data is going to be a bigger and bigger part of the equation in terms of being transparent and building trust. So we have like 1 or 2 minutes left, and we might have a couple questions. So I will wrap it up there and open the floor to questions. Yeah.
Hey, my name is Jerry from San Diego. I've done a lot of work with crime stats and all that. Some things I would really be helpful is when police are publishing crime data, tell us how it was done, tell us what's missing, tell us if it's, that the numbers will increase in about 6 months when some cases are closed. A lot of people don't really understand the life cycle of crime stats. Also, tell us about the UCR and what's reported to the FBI. And, inform people, like a glossary page, tell us what things are, tell us what things mean. The second thing is to give us estimated data for the current year and the current last year. 2013 crime means nothing to me. I don't know what we did in 2013, what was working and what wasn't. Give us estimated crime rates. Tell us this is completely estimated. It is near worthless. But to people like me, like data technologists and prevention people and people that are working on interventions, we really need to know more current data. You can't wait for you to clean it to get it to the FBI so that you can release it to the public. And I think if you manage the expectations of people, it really help. And the third thing is, tell us the crime threat, the threat of the crimes. That right now what's reported, from what I understand in San Diego, the city of San Diego anyway, is when a crime is reported, we know the most serious crime. So if the person did an arson and they beat up their wife and then they went and robbed a bank, we only know it's bank robbery. We don't know it was a domestic violence. We don't know it was the guy who's drunk from a bar in an over-concentrated area. We really need to know that history of the crime, not the bank crime. The bank crime is a symptom of the problem. The problem is long before. If we don't start making crime data 3D, it's near worthless. If you're looking at it from a community prevention point of view. So we really, Socrata, I want to challenge you for that, is that we really need to look at the threat of crimes so that we can go address domestic violence and then like end bank robberies.
Yeah.
Can I speak to that for a second?
Yeah, please.
It's funny you mention that, because actually with your request about the UCR data and your request about the threat of crime are actually two sides of the same thing. UCR, by definition, it's a 90-year-old process, requires the most intense crime to be the one that you report. So when you have a NIMERS compliant or UCR compliant system, and that's what a lot of these folks do, you're going to record the most violent. And so you can't say, I want UCR data, and explain that to some people. Also saying, I want this threat or any other potential
By
crime.
federal law, you have to do UCR, but in the community, if we're going to work on prevention, we need to know the threat of the crimes that
That's
person
true.
does.
However, you want this glossary. The glossary is the legal definitions of what these crimes are. You want a glossary for the state of Washington, you need to go read the RCWs for the most part, because these laws determine how we identify things. I understand your frustration. I've been at the police department in Seattle for over 6 years now, and I can tell you right now, asking a simple question like, hey, can I have a count of all the arrests, is a hugely complex issue, because at Joe Blow Public, they think the second this happens, I'm arrested. But I can tell you from a legal standpoint, you could be arrested, you could not be arrested, you could be arrested but not booked, you could be booked but not arrested, you could be charged but not arrested. It's crazy. And so a lot of times the frustration you're having about the data isn't so much about the police withholding the data or it usually has more to do with the fact that the laws and the requirements and policy that put in place are themselves inherently complex, which in turn requires or necessitates complexity in the data, which makes it very difficult to then subsequently analyze and parse it out.
Yeah.
And I realize the challenge is funding, but what we need is more funding in police departments for data scientists to help preventionists work on things to prevent crime so that we don't need that word. So I 100% support my
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Heather? Yeah, sure.
I just want to add quickly to it that I think one of the outcomes of open data, one of the potential outcomes of open data, is everything that you just mentioned, this complexity and the money that it takes to work with that stuff. If you make it open and then you challenge folks to provide the kinds of visualization tools and such around it that you want to see, you want to do 3D, that's a challenge up to the community to create that. But if data isn't open, then there is no ability to get folks involved to really figure out how to make that happen. It's not always the police department or the city who can figure it out. Sometimes it's the private sector who comes with that solution.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll add is that historically, most of this data has never been seen before. Only the past few years has any of this data been put out in the public sphere, and so naturally, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what the data is. And over time, with the more of the release of the data, to Justin's point, the contextualization of the data along with the release of the raw data, people start to understand it more and it starts to become baked in, but it takes a little bit of time. Candace?
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is government typically has this top-down approach, and sometimes when we're talking about open data, it came from that same place of transparency initially, like how can we learn more about what government is doing? What I think is really interesting from your presentation from New Orleans is the interaction that data creates between policymakers, government officials, and the community, where your police chief was there to see how people were engaging with data in that pre-release and kind of understand where the kind of choke points were, or where the confusion is. And I guess I'm just using this to advocate for more of these community events, because the outcomes that I've seen in Seattle at least are that the policymakers then understand what might need to change in the data collection and the data publication. So it's sort of the tip of the iceberg when we get out to the community that can result in a broader and deeper effort to kind of rethink how we release data so that it can be better understood by the public. I would love to see that happen at the federal level as well. So.
Just to make another plug for my session tomorrow. That's one of the that's one of the things that I would love to have this community chew on a bit. We're really happy with the event that happened in New Orleans, and it's this question of, so there's the piece of, once you have the data out there, there's the kind of the inherent transparency aspect, but what are some effective ways that we haven't thought of before to really just make it
Yeah. Maybe just one or two more questions because we're over time. I know people are ready to get a drink.
I think all the open police data initiatives are really cool, and those kind of align with what other sectors of government have done with open data. The big question for me, both in policy and tech, though, is footage, body cam videos, and things like that.
Yeah.
So I live in North Carolina. Their law pertaining to body cam footage is it's not released unless the department feels like it wants to. And some of that's from privacy concerns, some of it's from technical concerns. But I was just wondering, from the Socrata angle, it's really cool to see what they're doing in Seattle. But I think for places like where I'm from, there needs to be more tools, more widely available to process that footage. Otherwise, the departments are just going to say we can never release any of this. It's too much.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, to make sense of the data, so if you think about a police force like Dallas, you got 1,000 police officers, they're recording 6 hours of video a day, 6,000 hours of video every single day. That's got to be stored, it's got to be indexed, it's got to be redacted for the parts that are not appropriate before it can be shared publicly. There's a lot of technology to Bill's point. The technology is ready faster than the policy and the ways to handle it and store it. Also, when do you get rid of it? There's rules on evidence that are unclear for how long you're supposed to keep video footage. So there's a lot of things to work out on that point.
Just a couple of sentences on this. From a technology point of view, you could run all the video through an object recognition program and a facial recognition program, and right away you build a whole bunch of metadata about the video, who's in the video and what the objects are. But can you imagine the policy and governing issues of a facial recognition program for all the video? Non-starter.
And just say from a citizen who's interested in transparency, if I had say the tools to recommend, it would make say the policy discussion more reasonable. But
Certainly.
I can see that all that's still flux. So.
Yeah. Good. Well, I want to thank our guests for their presentation. And thanks for coming out, guys. Enjoy the happy hour.